What Pokemon should I talk about today? What about... That's right, today we're talking about Carbink, the strangest add-in from Regulation D. I have no idea why this is being added to the game at this specific time. But that doesn't matter because look at this fantastic offensive typing, except it's on Carbink. So this typing has 7 super effectives, including some very nice super effectives like flying and fire, dark. It's really quite good here, and the amount of Pokemon that actually resist this are quite low. However, this typing does not hit steel types very well at all, so you have to keep that in mind if you plan to use Carbink offensively, which if you don't know the stats on this thing, you'll find out that may be a bit difficult. And defensively, it gets even worse if all you ever fight is steel types, because we have one of the rare 4-time super effectives from steel, as well as weaknesses from ground, water, and grass. Now all 3 of these come from rock specifically, which is fun, but this typing does have a fairly good resist spread, resisting 5 typings and having the dragon immunity from fairy. On paper, this isn't that bad of a typing. The offense is pretty good. Defensively, this is the terrestrialized meta. You can answer steel with a defensive terra. Something like fire or water would work pretty well with this typing. You would still be weak to one of these though. You could just go for Fairy Terra and get rid of these 3 weaknesses altogether. So I think there's a good bit of options for Terra types with this typing specifically. As for abilities, we actually have 2 pretty good ones. The first one is Clear Body, which prevents opponents from lowering your stats. That is excellent. The hidden ability is Sturdy, which is also a good ability because it prevents you from being one-hit knocked out by literally anything, so that Scizor Bullet Punch doesn't just blow this thing up. It actually survives. Depending on the way you're building Carbink, what you're actually planning to do with it, both of these are solid abilities to choose from. Where things get interesting is when we talk about the stats. So 4 of the stats are 50, that being HP, the offense stats, and speed, which to give you an idea, that speed, it's right around the same area as Azumarill and Ice-Q, even Iron Hands. But the defense and special defense are 150 apiece. That is a lot, and it actually makes this Pokemon pretty bulky. It has higher bulk specially than Fluttermane, which Fluttermane's special bulk is actually pretty good. And if you put HP investment in this, it's actually kind of difficult to take down. Just as an example, I have put together a Carbink with a couple moves on it. That is just hit points investment as far as EVs go. And compared to that Fluttermane that I keep bringing up all the time because I'm sure a lot of Fluttermane are run similar to this, if you were to run Stone Edge and actually use Carbink offensively, which is weird to say, it can outpace Fluttermane as long as you can hit your Stone Edges. That's actually kind of impressive, and that's mostly because of Fluttermane's abysmal defense stat. But Carbink can actually be set up to fight Fluttermane head-on and win. That's just silly. That just shows how bulky this thing is. Even though its offensive stats pretty mediocre, like 50, that you're not getting a lot out of that, but the defensive stats make it quite solid at slowly chipping away at an opponent that cannot put the offense back into it, which this is Fluttermane we're talking about here. This is a very offensive Pokemon, and we can make it worse for Fluttermane. Because what if this had 252 Spadef with it as well? Well, now Fluttermane's doing not that much damage. Moonblast has a 95% chance to 3-hit KO, a very specially defensive Carbink, which if you're running this moveset for whatever reason, you could also run Assault Vest on it. And now that Moonblast has a 0.3% chance to 4-hit KO. I know that you're not supposed to run a Carbink like this, okay? I get it. But I just want to show these numbers because it's really funny that you could build a Carbink specifically just to make Fluttermane useless. It's hilarious because Fluttermane doesn't run steel moves to be super effective on Carbink. It just doesn't. So this just goes to show how many different options are really in this game that no one even thinks about using. But I mean, it's here. Well, it will be in Regulation D. There, I just gave somebody an idea. Now they're going to sweep a hyper offense team of Carbink. That's going to be fun. So let's compare that Carbink that I started with to Cresselia, which I'm just running a mixed defensive spread. And Cresselia without attack investment really doesn't put on a lot of damage, but neither does Carbink. Set up like this, Cresselia does actually outpace Carbink slowly, but if we were to put the 252 SpDef, it's still like that. We're just going to have to go all the way with this. Okay, Carbink's Moonblast is doing roughly 10 to 12%, and Cresselia's Psychic's doing 10 to 13%. So Cresselia does outpace Carbink in the stall war. So don't start thinking Carbink is A tier because you can design it to beat Flutter main. It's not going to beat Cresselia if Cresselia is built bulky, even if it's built offensive. We'll just put a little bit of special attack in there. And there, now you're doing 12 to 15%. So you get like possible 7 hit KO versus Carbink's possible 9 hit KO on special. With the way this is set up, Stone Edge actually does more damage and it's a possible 7 hit KO. The thing is, Stone Edge only has 8 uses, don't it? If I remember correctly. So you would have to connect all but one Stone Edge and hope for at least one crit, which Stone Edge being a high crit move, there's a good possibility of that. So again, this is not a set that you're supposed to run. This is just a showcase of Carbink because Carbink. So I already showed off some of the like better moves it gets, but it does get some other options like Power Gem, as well as Rock Tomb, Rock Blast, as well as Dazzling Gleam. And as for the coverage options, I already showed Body Press. This does get skill moves like Flash Cannon and Iron Head, even Heavy Slam. And its only other coverage move appears to be Psychic. Wow, this does not have a lot of offensive options. Supportive options are interesting. So this does get Guard Split, which depending on your team could actually be a useful option. This thing has a lot of defensive stats. I believe this also gets both screens. It gets 3 of the weathers, Charm to lower attack. It gets several arena traps like Spikes, as well as Stealth Rock. It does get Skill Swap, and Calm Mind, Misty Terrain, and Trick Room. And I almost forgot Iron Defense. Carbink has a very specialized moveset. Aside from stab options, which it has all of the good stab moves for its typings. So you have like Moonblast and Stone Edge, Rock Slide, all that good stuff. But what does Carbink actually do? Well, in Gen 8, it was primarily a Trick Room setter that required being hit twice because of sturdy, so in a way it was actually a very consistent Trick Room setter. I believe the other way Carbink was used in Gen 8 was as a Misty Explosion user in Misty Terrain, because that made sense. Carbink has never been a meta pick because its typing combined with its stats are incredibly weird. Like, it's supposed to be bulky, but Rock Fairy is offensive, not necessarily defensive. And it has an ability that synergizes with the defensive play, that being sturdy, but it also has one that synergizes with offensive play in the form of Clear Body. This feels like a Pokemon that wished it could be an offensive threat, but it has a hard time doing it because of its stats. That's why in Gen 8, with the introduction of Body Press, Carbink did have an offensive option in being a Iron Defense Body Press build, which in the Terrestrialized meta, it's a little bit better being able to do that because you can now turn it into a fighting type and you would have Stab Body Press. But Iron Defense Body Press builds are not super common in the meta right now. I think the only one that tends to get anywhere is Orthworm, and that is likely because of its ground immunity being quite helpful in keeping it alive. So I can't think of scenarios where you would really want Carbink. There already is another Trick Room setter that can run Body Press, and it has a much better defensive typing, and I think even a better support set, and that is Bronzong. So again, Carbink doesn't fit itself very well. It doesn't synergize with any of what it has outside of a relatively consistent Trick Room option. So I could see scenarios where it is used exactly like that as a Trick Room setter that may also have Body Press for offense. But trying to do anything else with it is kind of difficult. I know it's really bulky, so you could use it for stall tactics, but it doesn't have the greatest moves for stall tactics. I think what could make Carbink a lot better is if it had access to Sand Tomb. That way you could run it as bulky as possible and just stall out things. Well, it watches with those tiny blue eyes as your opponent slowly disappears. That being said, there's ways you can make it work. I showed with the calculations, you can literally just build this thing to beat Fluttermane straight up, and it would be next to impossible for Fluttermane to actually win that fight. So in that way, you could make it quite viable and even quite useful because Fluttermane's everywhere. So having Carbink as your answer to Fluttermane, it's not expected. People wouldn't think that Carbink could just beat Fluttermane straight up, but it can. So it could make a good surprise off-meta pick, but that's about the limit of Carbink, I think. Because I think there are better Trick Room options, especially Trick Room options that will synergize better with the Trick Room sweepers. Cresselia is just a better Trick Room setter in general, and a better Pokemon in general. So I don't think it's bad, but you're going to have to specialize it to really get utility out of it, and it probably sits somewhere in the C tier-ish range. And I think this Pokemon could be really good if it had just a little bit more options or a little bit more stats. In its current state, Trick Room Body Press is the most consistent you're going to get out of it, or just running an Assault Vest and have it as your Fluttermane answer. But anyway, if there's a Pokemon you want to see me cover for competitive analysis, such as Carbink, or for competitive speculation, like a Pokemon that we have no idea if it's being added into the game or not, let me know down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video and would like to promote it, the algorithm buttons are there for that reason. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.